She woke up on Easter Sunday without her mother, and instead of staying silent, she spoke. She said she was disappointed with God. She said she felt utter abandonment. She said she still believed, even though believing right now costs her something she cannot describe in words. Savannah Guthrie stood at a podium on Easter Sunday and told the world what 65 days of not knowing does to a person of faith. And then she walked back into the Today Show on Monday morning. What she said before she walked through those doors is the most honest thing anyone connected to this case has said publicly in 2 months, and it connects directly to everything this investigation has become. I am Febry. This is the Febry Report. Subscribe right now, because this video covers every active thread in this case, and none of it is being put together anywhere else the way we are about to put it together right now. Before we get to the investigation, we have to sit with what Savannah Guthrie said on Easter, because it is not a sidebar to this case. It is the emotional center of it. She shared a message ahead of her return to the Today Show that described her current state of faith with an honesty that most public figures would not have the courage to offer. She said she had felt utter abandonment. She questioned whether Jesus, in the darkness of his own suffering, had felt the same grief she was feeling now. She admitted disappointment with God, not a loss of faith, but the specific and searingly human experience of faith being tested by something it cannot immediately resolve. And then she said, "I still believe." 3 words, sitting on top of 65 days of waking up in the middle of the night, imagining her mother's terror. 65 days of not knowing. 65 days of carrying something that no theological framework, no professional support, no amount of public sympathy can fully absorb. To understand what that Easter message means, you have to understand what the 12 hours after she learned her mother was gone looked like. Savannah described it in her interview. A harrowing 12-hour odyssey that began with a panic call from her sister Annie in Tucson. She was calling hospitals from New York City. She was on the phone with her sister and with law enforcement simultaneously. She was trying to construct an explanation that made everything okay. Paramedics, a medical episode, a stretcher through the back door, while everything around her was telling her that no explanation that ended with okay was going to fit. It did not fit. Her mother was gone. And Savannah Guthrie has been living in the space between that moment and an answer ever since. Going back to work, maintaining composure on camera, speaking to a country that is watching, while privately sitting with a grief that is not yet allowed to resolve because the story has not yet ended. She said she wakes up every night in the middle of the night. Every night. Imagining her mother's terror. That is not a line written for an interview. That is a person telling you the truth about what their life is right now. I still believe. She said it on Easter Sunday, on the day the Christian tradition marks as the victory of life over death, of light over darkness, of answers arriving after the silence seemed permanent. She said it knowing exactly what day it was, and she meant it. Now, let us talk about what is happening in the investigation, because while Savannah was standing at a podium on Easter morning, holding her faith together with both hands, the case was generating new details that change how we understand the full picture. The desert terrain outside Tucson is not just a backdrop to this story. It is an active investigative question, and a former Pima County official is now providing chilling detail about exactly what that terrain represents. Crime and cold case investigator Cheryl McCollum visited the area personally, not from a map, not from drone footage, but on foot, in the heat, in the terrain itself. What she described is not the desert that people in other parts of the country picture. It is not flat, open, visible ground. It is unforgiven. Her exact word, unforgiven. The plants cut you. There are rattlesnakes and bobcats and mountain lions and black bears. The ground is as hard as cement. The heat on the day she arrived was 105 degrees, and the density of the brush is such that a person can disappear 20 feet from a standing position and become completely invisible. She described it plainly. Someone who wanted to dispose of evidence in that terrain would not need to be out of their vehicle for more than 30 seconds. Former SWAT commander Bob Krieger, who spent nearly 30 years working that specific zone, including supervising the Border Crime Unit for 5 years, described the same terrain as a corridor that was once a superhighway for criminal activity. Human smuggling, drug trafficking, body disposals, multiple homicide victims found in specific areas he walked through with reporters. 3 or 4 bodies left off a roadway on a single occasion. A serial killer whose victims were recovered in zones within striking distance of that terrain. A former Pima County official, now speaking to the press, has provided detail about the smuggling and violent crime landscape surrounding Tucson, a city located 60 miles from the Mexican border in one of the most active trafficking corridors in the United States. The FBI has already reached out to Mexican authorities as part of this investigation. Not because there is confirmed evidence Nancy Guthrie was taken across the border, because investigators cannot rule it out. And in a case where the original plan appears to have been a ransom extraction, a plan that appears to have gone wrong in ways that have never been publicly explained, the question of where Nancy Guthrie went after she was taken from her front door remains one of the most consequential and most unanswered questions in this entire case. The desert does not give up its secrets easily. McCollum said it directly. There are areas out there that search teams have not covered. The terrain makes comprehensive searching practically impossible without boots on the ground. Not helicopters, not drones, not thermal imaging from altitude. Boots. People walking it. Noticing a bedroom slipper, a piece of jewelry. Something that does not belong to that landscape. Volunteer search organizations with horses, ATVs, specialized equipment, and experienced searchers have offered to help. They have not been given access. That decision, made at the leadership level of an investigation that is already under scrutiny for how its leadership has managed every other major decision, is one that multiple experienced voices have described as inexplicable. Now let us address the man 2 miles away, because this is the thread that most coverage has either avoided or mishandled, and it deserves to be examined with precision and with appropriate legal framing. On a Friday night in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's front door, federal agents and sheriff's deputies executed 2 search warrants. 2. Both signed by a judge, one for a private residence, one for a gray Range Rover found in the parking lot of a nearby Culver's restaurant. The man at the center of those warrants is Luke Daly. He is 37 years old. He lives in Tucson. He was, at the time those warrants were executed, a convicted felon on active probation following a drug distribution conviction. His criminal record, confirmed through public court records, includes a 1.5 years in state prison between 2019 and 2020 for solicitation of drugs, criminal damage, and flight from law enforcement. A 2022 drug distribution conviction resulting in 4 years of probation, and a May 2025 arrest, alongside an associate named Kayla Null Day, in a Walmart parking lot in possession of fentanyl and an illegal firearm. A probation revocation was filed. A judge allowed him to remain in the community. As of February 2026, when federal agents executed those warrants, Luke Daly was still on active probation, still in Tucson, still in the Catalina foothills. His criminal defense attorney, who was already on retainer before any of this began, which means Daly already had ongoing legal representation before federal agents arrived, has stated clearly and on the record that his client has no link whatsoever to this case. Daly himself spoke publicly and said he has nothing to do with it. Those statements are on the record, and they matter. He has not been arrested, he has not been charged, he is not named a suspect by official law enforcement statements. That must be said clearly, and it has been said. But here's what must also be examined clearly, because in the careful legal language of an active federal investigation, precision matters. 3 facts. The DNA-bearing black gloves found approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. The FBI's specific public request for doorbell camera footage from every resident within a 2-mile radius of Nancy's address. Luke Daly's home, located approximately 2 miles from that same address, in the same neighborhood, in the same Catalina Foothills community. Same distance, 3 times. According to Sheriff Nanos's own public description of the investigative process, investigators develop a lead and follow it. They learn one thing about a person, then another. They compile intelligence. They bring it to the county attorney. Other FBI agents review it. Then they take it to a judge. That judge either agrees or does not. If he signs, they have a court order. 2 judges signed for this specific address, at this specific distance from this specific crime scene. And when reporters asked Sheriff Nanos after the raid whether Daly was cleared, the sheriff did not say yes. He said, "Does that mean he is not a suspect any longer?" "No, we will do our work. We have got evidence to process from the home." That is a sitting sheriff, on camera, confirming that the search of that specific property produced material that is still being analyzed. Contrast that with what the same sheriff said when online speculation began targeting members of the Guthrie family, including Nancy's son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni. Nanos stood at a podium and issued a personal, explicit, named defense of every family member. He called the accusations cruel. He called them victims. He used their names. That is what cleared sounds like from a sitting sheriff in an active federal investigation. Luke Daly has not received that statement. His attorney says he is clear. His own voice says it. But the sheriff, who went out of his way to name and defend the Guthrie family, has issued no equivalent statement about the man whose home was searched with 2 signed federal warrants. Released and cleared are not the same thing. And in this investigation, that difference is not accidental. The 2-night operation that surrounded that Friday raid is worth examining as a whole, because it tells a story about the investigative activity that was happening in the weeks after Nancy Guthrie's disappearance that has not been fully assembled in one place. The night before the Daly raid, law enforcement seized the gray Range Rover from the Culver's parking lot, approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home. That same night, a woman named Kayla Noel Day, the same individual arrested alongside Daly in the May 2025 Walmart incident, was detained at her Tucson residence, questioned, released. The following day, the Daly raid. 2 signed warrants, a traffic stop when Daly and his mother left the property, executed on a public road to enable the legal detention of the individuals while the search proceeded, physical samples taken, statements given, evidence collected from the home. The Range Rover sealed with evidence tape and towed. Court documents from the May 2025 arrests detail what was found when Daly and Day were arrested together. A backpack containing fentanyl pills and Suboxone strips. Cell phone messages confirming active drug sales. Both indicted on drug trafficking charges in Pima County Superior Court. 3 separate law enforcement operations across 2 consecutive nights, all connected to the same investigation, all targeting individuals with intertwined histories living in the same Tucson community. All within the geographic zone that the FBI itself defined as relevant through its 2-mile camera footage request. Online speculation has connected these individuals to broader drug trafficking networks operating in Tucson, a city 60 miles from the Mexican border, in a corridor where human smuggling, drug trafficking, and violent crime have historically intersected in exactly the terrain that Bob Krieger walked through with reporters. That connection has not been confirmed by law enforcement. We are not asserting it as fact. What is confirmed is the geography. What is confirmed is the warrants. What is confirmed is that the FBI has been in contact with Mexican authorities. What is confirmed is that the sheriff acknowledged evidence was collected and not yet fully analyzed. The investigation is not cold. It is building. Quietly, methodically, one search warrant at a time. The DNA situation deserves an updated examination because the picture has developed since the early days of this investigation, and what CeCe Moore and other forensic specialists have said publicly gives us a clearer framework than we had before. 2 labs are now working the DNA evidence from Nancy Guthrie's home. Not 1, 2. That development, confirmed by reporting, reflects both the complexity of the sample and the urgency being applied to it. The DNA collected from the scene is a complex mixture, meaning biological material from more than one unknown individual is present, creating the deconvolution challenge that current technology is still working to solve. But the physical samples collected from Luke Daly during his detention represent something significant. If DNA was taken from Daly, and his attorney confirmed that physical samples were collected during the detention, those samples can be compared against the glove DNA found 2 miles from Nancy's home. They can potentially be compared against the complex mixture from the interior of the house. The results of those comparisons have not been publicly disclosed. That silence is not unusual in an active federal investigation. Law enforcement does not announce what its laboratory results show while the case is ongoing. But the existence of collected samples, combined with the sheriff's confirmation that evidence from the home search is still being processed, means that the DNA picture is not static. It is active. It is developing. And what it eventually produces could change everything. Forensic genetic genealogist CeCe Moore has said publicly that if a viable SNP profile is extracted from that mixture, this case resolves within weeks. The FBI's genetic genealogy team is ready to move the moment a clean profile exists. The technology to deconvolute the specific type of complex mixture recovered from Nancy's home is being fast-tracked by scientists, whose work has been accelerated specifically because of the profile and urgency of this case. The physical samples collected from individuals detained in the course of this investigation add a different dimension to that picture. If direct comparison, not genealogical matching but straightforward profile comparison, produces a hit between one of those collected samples and the glove DNA or the house mixture, genetic genealogy becomes unnecessary. The answer would already be in the lab. Savannah Guthrie walked back into the Today Show on Monday morning for the first time since her mother disappeared. That sentence deserves to be held for a moment, because what she had to do to get there is not fully visible from the outside. She spent Easter Sunday speaking publicly about her faith. She described utter abandonment. She questioned whether Jesus had felt what she was feeling. She said she still believed. And then she got up on Monday morning and went to work. The 12 hours that followed the call from Annie on February 1st have now been more fully described through multiple reporting accounts. It was not a simple phone call. It was an odyssey. Savannah in New York, calling hospitals that had no record of her mother, calling the police who were already at the house while also trying to reach more hospitals, trying to build a scenario, a medical episode, paramedics, a stretcher, that would explain the back doors being open without meaning what it actually meant. Her sister Annie in Tucson, already past that stage of denial, already trying to communicate that this was not that kind of situation. And through all of it, the blood on the front steps, the disabled camera, the purse and phone and shoes left behind. The 12 hours after that call were, by every account, some of the most harrowing of Savannah Guthrie's life, and she has been living with the aftermath every single night since, waking up in the dark, in her own words, imagining her mother's terror. She has said publicly that she tends to believe 2 of the ransom notes received by the family were genuine, that the family responded, that she said, "We will pay," that no proof of life was ever provided. She has said that she believes her public profile may have made her mother a target, and that sitting with that belief costs her something she cannot fully articulate, other than looking into a camera and saying, "I am so sorry, Mommy. I am so sorry." Nancy Grace, the veteran prosecutor and crime victims advocate who lost her own fiancé to violent crime at the age of 19, said that watching Savannah's interview took her directly back to the moment she found out Keith was dead, to the feeling of sitting in the dark with words that were not built to hold what you were carrying, to the animal instinct of wanting to howl into nothing because language was simply not sufficient. She said, "These are the moments that change a person forever. Not just the event itself, but the not knowing, the suspended grief, the ache and wonder that cannot resolve because the story has not been allowed to end." The sheriff question cannot be separated from the investigation, and new details about Chris Nanos's background are making it harder, not easier, to dismiss the leadership failure narrative as political noise. 8 suspensions in a little over 5 years. At the El Paso Police Department, decades ago, use of force incidents. An individual who reportedly ended up in the hospital, weeks-long suspension periods, records that Nanos allegedly failed to disclose when he was hired at the Pima County Sheriff's Office, and that he allegedly denied under oath when asked about them directly. A Pima County supervisor interviewed by News Nation described it plainly. He was frankly a bad cop. And the supervisor's position is that if those records had been known at the time he was hired, he would not have been hired. Now add the TSA incident, a loaded, undeclared firearm carried through an airport security checkpoint. For any private citizen, that is a federal matter. For the sitting sheriff leading the most high-profile kidnapping investigation in the country, it is another entry in a pattern that the Pima County Board of Supervisors is now formally examining. 306 deputies in the union, every single one, voted no confidence. Not a majority, every single one. The recall effort is in progress. The Board of Supervisors is engaged. Formal discussions about what the supervisors are calling recently reported issues concerning the sheriff's work history and apparent related false statements are on the public agenda. And through all of it, the investigation continues. Not because of the leadership at the top, but in spite of it. The task force assembled from FBI agents and Pima County detectives is working. The sources inside the department who have spoken to journalists at personal professional risk have said consistently, the rank and file care. They are working tirelessly. They do not want to be defined by what is happening at the top. They deserve better than what they have been given. And so does Nancy Guthrie's family. There is a detail from the investigation's early days that has surfaced again in recent reporting, and it connects the geographic and investigative threads in a way worth stating clearly. In the Catalina foothills area of Tucson, neighbors recognize each other's cars. They notice strangers. It is a community where contractors, delivery drivers, and regulars stand out, precisely because the neighborhood is enclosed enough that unfamiliar faces register. And yet, someone surveilled Nancy Guthrie's home across at least 2 dates in January without being definitively identified by any neighbor or any camera. A former Pima County official speaking to the press has described the broader Tucson landscape in terms that connect to that reality. The area is not isolated from the trafficking and criminal networks that operate through the region. Professionals in criminal logistics, people who understand counter-surveillance, who understand how to move through a neighborhood without leaving traces, who understand how to execute an operation without creating the visual disorder that announces itself to neighbors, exist in proximity to this community in ways that are not always visible from the outside. The specialized skill set assessment made by private investigators and former law enforcement professionals analyzing the case footage aligns with that reality. The suspect on the Nest camera is calm, prepared, operating with the composure of someone who has thought through what they were doing before they did it. Whether that person is connected to any larger network, criminal, trafficking, or otherwise, is something investigators are working through. Whether the 2-mile geography is coincidence or significance is something the lab results will eventually answer. What is not speculative is what has been confirmed by signed warrants, confirmed evidence collection, and a sheriff who acknowledged on camera that analysis is still ongoing. The investigation is active, the evidence is being processed, and the geography keeps pointing at the same distance. 65 days. Savannah Guthrie said she wakes up every night in the middle of the night, imagining her mother's terror. Every night. Not some nights. Every single night. She went to Easter Sunday and told God she was disappointed. She told a congregation that she felt abandoned. And then she said the 3 words that required the most from her. I still believe. And then, on Monday morning, she walked back into the Today Show. That is what 2 months of not knowing looks like on a person who has chosen not to fall apart. Not because the pain is smaller, but because falling apart does not bring her mother home. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She was taken from her bed in her pajamas, without her shoes, without her medication, in the dark hours of a February night by someone who had studied her home for weeks and came prepared. She left behind her phone, her purse, and a family that has not had a peaceful night since. The investigation has active threads, DNA in 2 labs, physical samples collected from at least 1 detained individual, 2 signed federal warrants whose evidence is still being processed, cell tower data, Google search records, a Bitcoin address being watched in real time, a desert terrain that may hold evidence that boots on the ground have not yet found, and a forensic genealogist who has said plainly, "Give me a viable profile and I will have a name within weeks." The reward is over $1 million. The tip line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. Anonymous. No arrest required. No conviction required. 1 call. If you were in the Catalina foothills area in January or early February, if you saw a vehicle that did not belong, if you noticed something that felt wrong but seemed too small to mention, if you know something that you have been carrying for 65 days because you were not sure it mattered, it matters. That number is open right now. Nancy Guthrie deserves to come home. Her daughter is standing at an anchor desk right now, carrying something that has no name, saying, "I still believe," meaning it with everything she has, and waiting for the call that changes everything. We stay on this case. We do not move on. If this video gave you something, share it, like it. If the Febry Report is new to you, subscribe. We go deeper. We stay longer. We fight for the cases that deserve to be fought for. I am Febry. This is the Febry Report. Thank you for being here.